The compound gate slammed shut with a force that rattled the rusted hinges. Amara stood frozen in the doorway of her father's study, watching her mother and sister huddle over documents spread across the mahogany desk, Papa Emeka's desk. The desk he died at just 6 months ago. Mama Ngozi's lips moved rapidly, forming words Amara couldn't hear but could read perfectly. We need her signature before she realizes what these properties are worth. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. She stepped back silently, her bare feet making no sound on the cool tiles. 13 years. 13 years of watching mouths move, of reading lips, of catching whispers that were never meant for her eyes. But this was different. This wasn't just cruelty. This was theft. It had started on an ordinary morning when she was 16. Amara had woken up in their Lagos home to a world wrapped in cotton wool, silent, terrifying, absolute. The doctors at Lagos University Teaching Hospital had been sympathetic but firm. Sudden sensorineural hearing loss, permanent, possibly from an untreated infection that had gone unnoticed. Her world of Lagos street hawkers, church bells, Nollywood movies, and her father's deep laughter had vanished overnight. Why her? Mama Ngozi had asked the doctor, as if Amara wasn't sitting right there. What kind of future can a deaf girl have? Papa Emeka had squeezed Amara's hand. He was the only one who'd faced her when he spoke, the only one who'd learned that she needed to see lips to understand. She'll have whatever future she wants, he'd said firmly. We'll make sure of it. But Papa Emeka was gone now, and the whispers had started long before his death. Amara had taught herself to lip read with a desperation born of isolation. Her secondary school friends had drifted away when conversation became difficult. Her boyfriend Tunde had stayed, but his patience wore thin when she couldn't hear his sweet words, couldn't respond to his calls when she wasn't looking at him. Her older sister Chioma had been the worst. It's exhausting, Chioma had told her friend Adeyes one afternoon, thinking Amara couldn't hear because her back was turned. But Amara had seen Chioma's reflection in the window glass, watched her lips form the words, having to deal with her all the time. She's become our family burden. How will we even marry her off now? The words had cut deeper than any blade. But Amara had learned to use her pain as armor, her silence as camouflage. She'd become invisible in her own home, a ghost haunting the compound's corridors while life happened around her. The years had crawled by. Amara was 29 now, working from home as a graphic designer, rarely leaving the Enugu compound they'd moved to after Papa's business had expanded. The family had relocated when she was 23, seeking new opportunities in the southeast. Papa had built something substantial: properties, land, investments, and he'd protected her. My Amara is sharper than all of you combined, he'd told the family once at dinner. She'd lip-read it, seen the pride in his face. Don't ever forget that. But 2 years ago, Papa Emeka had clutched his chest during a business meeting and collapsed. Heart attack. By the time they'd gotten him to the hospital, he was gone, and with him went Amara's only shield. The changes had been gradual at first. Uncle Obi, Papa's younger brother, had started visiting more frequently. He'd bring documents, spread them across the dining table, and speak to Mama Ngozi in hushed tones, though never hushed enough. That land in Abuja alone is worth 40 million naira. Amara had read on Uncle Obi's lips one evening. But she doesn't know what Papa left her. We need to act before she consults another lawyer. 3 plots in Abuja, 2 commercial properties in Enugu, a shopping plaza in Onitsha, a house in Asaba. Investments Amara had barely known existed. Her father's legacy, built over decades of hard work, and they wanted it all. Tunde had revealed his true colors too. She'd watched him on the phone one night, sitting in the veranda with his back to her room. But the mirror in the hallway had shown his face clearly as he'd spoken. Just small time remain. Once I marry her, everything goes smooth. Who go believe deaf woman over me? The betrayal had been a physical pain, sharp and breathtaking. But Amara had swallowed it down, let it fuel the cold rage building in her chest. She'd continued to play her part, the helpless, deaf daughter, the grateful girlfriend, the family burden who couldn't possibly manage her own affairs. But she'd also been planning. The letter had been hidden in Papa's old Bible, tucked between the pages of Psalm 35. Contend, Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. She'd found it 3 months after his death, written in his careful handwriting. My dearest Amara, it read. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I fear your mother and her family may try to take what's rightfully yours. Trust no one but Barrister Okonkwo in Abuja. He has copies of everything. He knows my wishes. You are stronger than they think, my daughter. You've survived 13 years of silence with more grace than they've shown in a lifetime of hearing. Don't let them steal your voice. Love, always, Papa. Amara had memorized every word. Then she'd contacted Barrister Okonkwo in secret. But she'd needed more than legal documents. She'd needed proof of their intentions, evidence of the conspiracy that was unfolding around her. And for that, she'd needed to hear. The cochlear implant surgery had been performed at a private hospital in Abuja. She'd told the family she was attending a digital marketing conference in Accra. The surgery had cost nearly all of her personal savings, money from her design work that she'd hidden in a separate account Mama Ngozi didn't know existed. Dr. Adeyemi had been cautiously optimistic. You've been deaf for 13 years, he'd explained, his lips moving in the pattern she'd learned to read. It will take time for your brain to reinterpret sound. Don't expect miracles immediately. The activation day had been overwhelming. When Dr. Adeyemi had turned on the processor, the world had crashed into her consciousness like a wave. The hum of the air conditioning, the click of the doctor's pen, the rustle of her own clothing, her own breathing loud, almost violent in her ears, traffic outside, voices in the hallway, birds she couldn't even see. She'd wept, trembling with the sensory overload. 13 years of silence, shattered in an instant. Take your time, doctor, Adeyemi had said gently, and she'd heard his voice, actually heard it for the first time. You'll need weeks of therapy to adjust. But Amara hadn't told anyone. She'd returned to Enugu with the processor hidden beneath her head wrap, acting exactly as she had before. Deaf, helpless, unaware. Only now, she could hear everything. The first conversation she'd overheard had confirmed her worst fears. Mama Ngozi and Chioma in the kitchen, speaking Igbo, thinking Amara couldn't possibly understand them. Once she signs the family trust agreement, we'll sell the Abuja lands immediately. Mama Ngozi had said, split everything 3 ways, me, you, and Obi. She won't even know the real value until it's too late. What about Tunde? Chioma had asked. He gets his cut for keeping her distracted. That boy has done well. Pretending to love a deaf woman for 2 years, he deserves something for his trouble. They'd laughed. Actually laughed. Amara had gripped the kitchen door frame so hard her knuckles had turned white, but she'd forced herself to remain calm, to walk away silently, to continue her charade. Over the next 2 weeks she'd recorded everything. The processor had a recording function she'd barely understood existed, but Barrister Okonkwo had helped her optimize it for clarity. Uncle Obi's visits, Tunde's phone calls, Mama Ngozi's planning sessions with Chioma, all of it, captured in crystal clear audio. That girl cannot fight us, Uncle Obi had told Mama Ngozi in the parlor. Who will believe a deaf woman? We'll say she's confused, that she doesn't understand what she's signing. The courts will rule in our favor, family looking after disabled relative. Papa wasted his money educating her, Chioma had added, sending her to that expensive school, paying for therapy. At least we can put her inheritance to proper use. Each word had been a knife. But Amara had recorded every one. Evidence. Irrefutable proof of their conspiracy. Barrister Okonkwo had been horrified when she'd played the recordings in his Abuja office. This is elder abuse, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, he'd said, his face grave. We have enough here to secure restraining orders and press criminal charges if necessary. I don't want them in prison, Amara had said quietly, hearing her own voice, still strange to her ears. I just want them out of my life. Forever. The family meeting had been Amara's idea. She'd announced it calmly one morning at breakfast, her hands moving in the sign she'd been using for years. I'm ready to sign the documents. I want to do it properly, with everyone present. Mama Ngozi's eyes had lit up with barely concealed greed. That's wonderful, my daughter. You're making the right choice. Family must stay together. We'll have dinner first. Amara had signed. Celebrate Papa's memory properly. Then we sign. They'd agreed immediately, practically salivating at their impending victory. The compound's main hall had been set up beautifully. Amara had insisted on it, her father's favorite jollof rice, fried plantains, pepper soup that filled the air with spicy aroma she could now smell alongside the sounds of its preparation. The long dining table had been set, with Papa's good china. And, at the head of the table, Amara had placed her laptop and portable speakers, ostensibly to play Papa's favorite high-life music. They'd arrived dressed in their finest Mama Ngozi in expensive Ankara, Chioma in a designer dress that probably cost more than Amara's monthly income, Uncle Obi in an agbada that proclaimed his self-importance, and Tunde in a suit that looked uncomfortably tight. Extended family members had been invited: 2 cousins, aunties, uncles who'd barely spoken to Amara since she'd lost her hearing. Before we eat, Mama Ngozi had announced, beaming at the gathered crowd, let us thank God for giving our Amara the wisdom to trust her family in these difficult times. A woman alone cannot manage such complex business matters. The relatives had nodded approvingly. Poor deaf Amara, their faces said. Good thing her family is looking after her. Amara had stood up, moved to the laptop. Every eye had followed her. Tunde had reached for her hand, squeezed it with false affection. I'm so proud of you, he'd murmured, forgetting she supposedly couldn't hear him. Before I sign anything, Amara had said clearly, her voice steady and strong in the silent room. There's something everyone needs to hear. The shock on their faces had been almost comical. Mama Ngozi's mouth had fallen open. Chioma had actually gasped. Tunde had jerked his hand away as if burned. You can speak? Mama Ngozi had stammered. I can speak, Amara had confirmed, but more importantly, I can hear. She'd pressed play. Mama Ngozi's voice had filled the room, crystal clear from the speakers. Once she signs, we sell the Abuja lands, split everything 3 ways. She won't even know the value until it's too late. Chioma's laughter had followed. Papa wasted his money on her. At least we can use it properly. Uncle Obi's sneering words, who will believe a deaf woman? Will say she's confused, doesn't understand what she's signing. Tunde's voice on the phone, just small time remain. Once I marry her, everything goes smooth. Who go believe deaf woman over me? The recordings had played for 5 full minutes, conspiracy, mockery, cruelty, greed, all laid bare before the horrified extended family. Some relatives had started crying. Others had begun shouting at Mama Ngozi and her co-conspirators. Chioma had lunged for the laptop, but the main door had opened. Barrister Okonkwo had entered with 2 police officers, his face stern. Mrs. Ngozi Okafor, Mr. Obi Okafor, Miss Chioma Okafor, and Mr. Tunde Adeleke. He'd announced formally, I'm here to inform you that restraining orders have been issued against all of you. You are prohibited from contacting Miss Amara Okafor or attempting to access any properties or assets belonging to her or her late father's estate. Furthermore, guardianship rights previously held by Mrs. Ngozi Okafor have been legally revoked. Miss Amara Okafor is recognized as fully competent to manage her own affairs. This is madness, Mama Ngozi had shrieked. She's my daughter. I was trying to protect her. Protect her? Auntie Nkim, Papa's older sister, had risen from her seat, fury in her eyes. You were stealing from her. From your own child. Emeka would be ashamed. The compound had erupted. Extended family members who'd witnessed everything had turned on the conspirators with righteous anger. In Igbo society, elder abuse and theft from vulnerable family members was among the worst crimes imaginable. The shame alone would follow them forever. Amara, please, Tunde had tried, reaching for her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Amara had said, her voice like ice. I heard every word, every lie, every scheme. For 2 years, You pretended to love me while planning to rob me. Get out, all of you. Get out of my father's house." The police had escorted them from the compound as the remaining relatives watched in satisfaction. Justice, swift and public, in the way that mattered most in their community. That had been 6 months ago. Now Amara stood on her balcony in Calabar, watching the Atlantic Ocean stretch endlessly before her. The small house she'd bought was perfect: 2 bedrooms, a studio for her design work, and this balcony where she could sit and simply breathe. She'd sold the Enugu compound. Too many painful memories. But she'd kept Papa's other properties, managed now by trustees she'd carefully vetted. The Amara Emeka Foundation had opened its doors 3 months ago. Free hearing aids for children who couldn't afford them, sign language classes, lip reading instruction, advocacy for deaf rights across Nigeria. Papa's legacy, transformed into something that would help hundreds. She'd also found community. Zainab, a deaf fashion designer who'd become her closest friend. Ngozi, her hearing neighbor who'd learned sign language just to chat with her over morning tea. And Chidi, a deaf teacher at the school where she volunteered, whose smile made her heart race in a way Tunde's never had. Because Chidi saw her, really saw her. Not as a burden or an opportunity, but as Amara. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Amara could hear the waves crashing against the shore, children playing football on the beach below, high-life music drifting from a nearby bar. She reached up and carefully removed her cochlear implant processor. The silence rushed in, familiar and no longer frightening. This silence was different from the silence of her teenage years. That silence had been imposed, a prison built by loss and other people's cruelty. This silence was chosen. Hers to control, hers to break whenever she wanted. She thought of Mama Ngozi, now living in a modest flat in Onitsha, shunned by most of the family. Of Chioma, whose engagement had been broken when her fiancé's family had heard about the scandal. Of Uncle Obi, whose business reputation had been destroyed. Of Tunde, who'd slunk back to Lagos in disgrace. Their greed had cost them everything: family, respect, community standing, all for money they'd never managed to steal. Amara picked up her phone, typed a message to Chidi. "Dinner tomorrow? I'll cook." His response came immediately. "I'll bring wine, and maybe stay for breakfast?" She smiled, her heart light. 13 years she'd watched them lie. 13 years she'd survived in silence, learning to read the truth in movements and expressions, developing a strength she'd never known she possessed. Papa had been right. She was stronger than any of them had imagined. The ocean breeze lifted her head wrap slightly. Amara closed her eyes, feeling the wind on her face, the vibrations of distant music through the balcony railing, the peace of a life reclaimed. Silence and sound. Both were gifts now. Both were hers to choose. And that, she thought as the sun disappeared below the horizon, was the loudest truth of all.